Chapter 321. Fleur Gets Lost. About 5 minutes later, Vincent led Torch out of the cave. It had been completely cleared. Frugal by nature, Vincent hadn't let the Acromantula corpses go to waste. Though most were ruined, he still managed to collect enough venom to fill a basin and packed a bag of legs for Torch. Who knew how many had fallen during Torch's rampage? And Aragog, he hoped Hagrid wouldn't be too upset. Vincent had left one whole corpse intentionally, so Hagrid could recognize it. Even after so long apart, Torch still obeyed Vincent as if he were his old keeper. On the path through the Forbidden Forest, Vincent walked ahead while the massive dragon trailed, pushing saplings aside with his bulk and nudging Vincent's shoulder from time to time. "I've told you 100 times, Torch," Vincent said under his breath. "You're not little anymore. Stop bonking me with your head." He glanced left, and his words died on his lips. A clearing had erupted with flowers and mushrooms so vivid they seemed to burn. Vincent froze. These were the same plants Fleur had summoned during the competition earlier. Could Fleur be nearby? He followed the line of growth. The blossoms and fungi formed a straight, unnatural path deep into the forest. Torch, behind him, suddenly growled low, eyes sharpening. He pawed the earth restlessly, as if sensing danger. "What's wrong?" Vincent turned and patted Torch's head, but the dragon only grew more alert. A rumble vibrated in his chest, and he spat a few sparks. Vincent knew Torch wouldn't behave like that without cause. "Eldra," he called to the Tree of Wisdom. The tree's voice echoed in his mind. "Sir, there is a curse ahead. It is advised you do not approach." A curse. Vincent narrowed his eyes. He had no time to be tangled up with curses and was about to turn back when Torch, for reasons Vincent couldn't tell, lunged ahead. Roar! Flame leapt from Torch's maw and swept through the flowers and mushrooms. In an instant, they blackened and smoked. Torch stamped and scalded the ground until nearby birds exploded into flight. He seemed driven, angry at the plants for reasons Vincent couldn't guess. When the dragon finally calmed, Vincent slipped an enchanted green rope around his neck. "Just a short tether," he said, "so you don't run off again. You've caused enough trouble." Torch chewed and clawed at the rope for a few moments, then relented and allowed himself to be guided. Vincent moved on, but the rope pulled taut and halted him after only a few steps. "Torch?" he asked, turning. The dragon was fixated on a point ahead. A blue figure flashed by among the trees. Torch spread his wings and leaped, trying to charge, but the magic leash tightened and yanked him back to the ground with a heavy thud. Vincent shook his head. "I should have warned you. Don't go too far." Torch grunted twice, anger still simmering, but he stayed down, eyes locked on that direction. Vincent's guess was immediate. Those cursed plants and that blue streak could mean only one person, Fleur Delacour. But what in the Forbidden Forest was she doing? Vincent flicked his wand in a practiced arc. The tip shone pale blue. Impedimenta, extendo! A thin rope of light shot forth like a quick snake through brambles and thickets. It extended hundreds of meters in an instant and wrapped around the blue figure's waist. "Ah!" Fleur cried. The rope yanked her off her feet and dragged her toward Vincent. She skidded to a stop at his feet, disoriented, leaves clinging to her wet blue robes and silver hair askew. She fumbled to her feet, coughing slightly. Vincent regarded her with a raised eyebrow. "Miss Delacour, what are you doing here? The Forbidden Forest is, well, forbidden." Fleur didn't answer the question. Sovremang. She went pale at the sight of Torch and stumbled back, eyes wide. Torch bared his teeth and let out a low rumble, ready to spring. Vincent tightened the leash. The dragon settled with a whine and sat obediently. Fleur's shoulders eased and she let out a shaky breath. Vincent had suspected part of it already. "You provoked this dragon?" Fleur's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "No, well, I was taking a walk in the forest and a dragon suddenly attacked me. It breathed fire. My robes are scorched," she said, tugging at the singed sleeve to show the burn marks. "I ran for quite a while to get away, and I got lost." She finished with a sheepish little smile that did nothing to hide how mortified she felt. Vincent stared, slightly stunned. So Torch had bolted after her, but why would Torch chase Fleur? 322. Take a day off. I got hit by a car. Luckily, it was just a scrape on the head. Some ointment will do. Could have been worse. Oh, no. Chapter 323. The Problematic Egg. Although Vincent didn't speak dragon, A few minutes of gestures and glances with Torch were enough for him to grasp the creature's intentions. The explanation, when it came, left him a little bewildered. Torch had been pursuing Fleur not out of malice, but because it felt it had lost face among the other dragons during the Triwizard tournament. Fleur's charm magic had humiliated it. It wanted to prove itself again, which explained its violent reaction the moment it saw her. Then it had simply lost track of her in the chase. Poor Aragog had suffered an undeserved mishap because of that confusion. When Vincent mentioned his theory, Fleur blinked in disbelief. Just for something so trivial? It chased me all that way for that? The way dragons think isn't the same as humans, Vincent mused. But aren't you supposed to be able to affect dragons with your magic? Why would? That's private, Professor. Fleur cut him off with an apologetic look. I can't tell anyone. It's personal. I'm afraid I can't use that magic right now. Vincent studied her more closely. Aside from a paler face, she looked normal. He caught himself saying a single syllable, Eldra, and let his senses reach out to the Tree of Wisdom. The tree answered with a single, clear impression. Status, magic unstable. Unstable. Vincent glanced back at Fleur and noticed for the first time a small red flower had pushed up through the winter grass at her feet, bright and oddly out of place. Fleur's reticence made him decide not to press further. We should head back, Miss Delacour. He inclined his head toward her carriage. Gabrielle will be worried. At the edge of the forbidden forest, they ran into Dumbledore and Charlie, who had come running. The other dragon handlers were nowhere in sight, probably still searching for Torch. Charlie breathed a huge sigh of relief when he saw Vincent leading the dragon. You found it. Thank you, Professor Vincent. Vincent handed the rope back to Charlie. This binding will probably lose its effect in about an hour. Prepare accordingly. We will, Charlie said, dabbing his forehead. We've applied for sturdier containment wards so this Chinese fireball doesn't get loose during transport again. With Torch secure, the immediate crisis ended. Dumbledore turned to Fleur with a smile. Miss Delacour, what were you doing here? Fleur explained the attack, and Charlie, abashed, offered an apology on behalf of the dragon handling team. If Torch had caught her, he admitted, the consequences could have been terrible. Vincent, however, thought the situation wasn't as dire as it sounded. Torch liked to make a scene but knew its limits. Had it killed someone, its days roaming free would have been over. At least for a long time it would have been confined to the reserve. Vincent saw Fleur onto the carriage, exchanged a quick greeting with Gabrielle, and then headed back toward the castle. It was growing dark when hurried footsteps sounded behind him. Professor, Harry called, jogging up with the golden egg from yesterday's task clutched in both hands. Oh, Harry, Vincent smiled. First, congratulations on winning the task. Is there something you need this late? It's the golden egg. Harry scratched his head. It's about to break. Vincent glanced at the egg. A hairline crack had widened to cover nearly a third of the surface. How did it get like that? Harry winced. My roommate was practicing Oxio in the dorm common room. The spell went wrong and blew up the bedside table. The egg was on it. Seamus always blows something up when he practices. Vincent suppressed a smile. Seamus Finnegan was hardly an unknown quantity. All right, let's take it to my office. We've got time to look at it. A few minutes later, they were inside Vincent's tidy study. Harry set the egg carefully on the desk. The crack had spidered farther, running across much of the shell. Have you opened it? Vincent asked. Yes, Harry said, frowning. It's empty inside, but when it opens it screams, really loudly. It's enchanted to produce a sound, Vincent said. If it goes off here, it could fill the room for days. We don't want that. He considered. Have you tried a mending charm? Harry nodded and drew his wand. Reparo. The charm hit the shell. Instead of sealing, the crack snapped and widened with a brittle, alarming sound, as if whatever was trapped inside were pushing to get out. Oh no, Harry's face fell. He wasn't confident with Reparo. He'd gambled and lost. Vincent moved with calm precision. He flicked his wand, and a transparent bubble formed at the tip like the bell of a jellyfish, drifting down to surround the trembling egg. The membrane was perfectly smooth and shimmered with light. Then a clear, viscous liquid pooled into the bubble, filling it until the egg was completely submerged. The sound from within muffled almost to silence, reduced to a faint, desperate whimper beneath the liquid's surface. Chapter 323, How to Become as Strong as Harry. This is... Harry's eyes widened as he stared at the golden egg suspended inside the magic bubble. Professor Vincent explained, "You should have solved this riddle yourself. But your egg is about to explode. It's probably beyond saving." No sooner had he finished than the bubble around the egg shuddered violently. Before Harry could react, the golden egg burst under the water. Professor Vincent flicked his wand, and an invisible barrier sprang up in front of Harry. The shards of shell passed through the bubble, struck the barrier, and rattled to the floor. "Be more alert, Harry," Vincent scolded. "You knew it was going to explode. Why weren't you prepared?" Harry scratched his head. "You were here, Professor." "Well, I can't argue with that." Vincent relaxed slightly. Both of them turned their attention back to the hovering bubble. The water inside glowed pale blue, silver motes drifting through it like moonlight caught in a pond. "Magic is astonishing," Vincent said. "It can hold things that are invisible or intangible, sounds, for instance. Although I suppose muggles have ways of doing that too. Are you ready, Harry? There's only one hint." Before Harry could answer, Vincent waved his wand. A thin crack opened in the top of the bubble, and an otherworldly, lingering song slipped out and filled the office. "Come seek us where our voices sound. We cannot sing above the ground. And while you're searching, ponder this. We've taken what you'll sorely miss. An hour long you'll have to look, and to recover what we took. But past an hour, the prospect's bleak. To retrieve it, you'll never speak." When the final note faded, Vincent clapped softly. The merpeople's song, having been translated by magic, sounded beautiful. He suspected the original would be harsh, like 100 cats scratching on a blackboard. "That's your hint, Harry." He put his wand away, and the bubble dissolved into countless specks of light, leaving only a shimmering puddle on the floor. Harry frowned, the melody of the song still in his head. "What does it mean? What does sorely miss refer to?" "You'll have to work that out," Vincent said with a small smile. "Write down the lyrics and prepare. Don't waste time." Harry nodded solemnly. The next day at noon, Vincent realized he hadn't told Harry and Cedric that Dumbledore had appointed him as Hogwarts Triwizard Tournament instructor. As he walked down the tapestry-lined corridor on the 6th floor, he came across Cedric emerging from the prefect's bathroom, water still dripping from his hair. "Good afternoon, Professor Vincent," Cedric said as he approached. Vincent noticed Cedric was carrying a wet golden egg. Clearly, he'd solved the riddle. There was no other reason to be in the bathroom in the middle of the day. "So you found the secret of the golden egg?" Vincent asked. Cedric nodded, but his expression was uncertain. "Yes, well, I think so. I'm not completely sure." "Good," Vincent patted his shoulder. "Coincidentally, I have something to tell you. Dumbledore has appointed me the Hogwarts instructor for the Triwizard Tournament. If you have any questions, you can come to me." "Really?" Cedric looked surprised, then a shadow crossed his face. "I'm afraid I disappointed you, Professor. My performance in the first task, it wasn't good. I don't know how to do better." Vincent regarded him kindly. "You did fine, Cedric. The tournament has just begun. Falling behind now doesn't mean anything permanent. You still have 2 tasks to catch up. Think of it like a Quidditch match. You can always pull back before the snitch is caught. Anything can change." "You're right." Cedric exhaled. He understood the truth of Vincent's words. Self-pity was useless, but the disappointment lingered. He had been used to being one of the best. Ending up at the bottom of the field stung. Facing the Hufflepuff students who expected him to do well made him feel as if he'd let them down, even though they were kind and encouraging. Vincent saw it and didn't overdo the consolation. Students like Cedric needed only to reset their mindset and prepare. "I'll get ready for the second task," Cedric promised. Vincent left the 6th floor for his office. As he reached his door, he noticed a red-haired boy hovering outside, frowning and hesitating whether to knock. "Ron?" Vincent paused. What could the boy want? "Hello, Ron," Vincent said, stepping forward and patting him on the shoulder. "Were you waiting for me?" Ron jumped and nearly bumped the doorframe. When he recognized Vincent, he let out a shaky sigh. "Do you always walk without making a sound, Professor?" he asked automatically. "Of course not," Vincent chuckled. "Just trying to scare you." Ron gave a nervous laugh and relaxed a little. He rubbed his hands together, his gaze darting as if arranging his words. Vincent guessed he had something difficult to say and opened the door. "Come in and sit down, Ron. Would you like some hot cocoa?" Ron nodded and followed Vincent inside. The warmth of the fireplace and the hot drink eased some of the tension from his shoulders. Vincent sat behind his desk and steepled his fingers. "So," he said, "what did you want to talk about?" Ron set his cocoa down and sat up straight, fingers worrying the edge of the mug. He took a deep breath and said, "Professor, I want to know, how can I become as strong as Harry? I mean, handling dragons and all." Vincent raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. "Why do you ask?" Ron's breath came in short, nervous bursts. "I want to be able to face a dragon on my own, like Harry did." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I want to defeat one single-handedly." Chapter 324, Ron's Condition. Vincent hadn't expected Ron to ask that kind of question. How could he make Ron as strong as Harry? It was encouraging to see his student motivated, but the question still caught him off guard. Everyone is different. As the protagonist of this world, Harry had extraordinary talent, and with Vincent's guidance over the past few years, he'd reached his current level. Ron, however, the Weasleys had excellent genes. Each sibling had their own strengths. Bill was a top cursebreaker at Gringotts, Charlie worked with dragons, Percy excelled at academics, and the twins had a knack for invention. "If you want to defeat a dragon," Vincent said, stroking his chin, "that will take a long time of practice. Or are you thinking of becoming a dragon tamer, like your brother Charlie?" "Dragon tamer?" Ron frowned, thought for a moment, then shook his head. That wasn't part of his plan. He didn't really have a plan yet. He was only in his 4th year. Careers at Hogwarts started to matter in the 5th year, when househeads offered one-on-one guidance. "If you don't want to be a dragon tamer," Vincent shrugged, "why do you want to take on dragons at all? Do you think a dragon will just show up in front of your house waiting for you to defeat it? We don't deal with dragons in daily life." "But," Ron began, then ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm not talking about dragons. I just want to be as good as Harry." "Oh." Vincent's expression softened. "That's simpler. There's only one way to get stronger. More training, more spells, more knowledge." "So what should I do?" Ron's confusion was obvious. "Study hard," Vincent said with a wink, "and if you want, I can give you extra lessons over the holidays, free of charge." "Really?" Ron's mouth opened, but he didn't know what to say. "Becoming stronger isn't overnight work. It's like building a tall tower," Vincent paused. "If you insist on becoming powerful instantly, you could learn some relatively, illegal magic." He saw Ron's shocked face and quickly added, "I'm joking." Ron relaxed a little. "Feeling lost is normal," Vincent continued as he stood. "Oh, I have to go. One more thing. Have a little more confidence." "Confidence?" "Yes. Believe in yourself, then keep studying and practicing." He shrugged into his thick robe. "That's all." Ron nodded thoughtfully. The advice was simple and obvious, but simple things are the hardest to do. Vincent felt pessimistic about Ron's current state, but said, "All right, go back now, Ron." Time flew. December arrived, and the castle grew colder. For 2 weeks, Harry and Hermione watched in surprise as the usually lazy Ron suddenly buckled down. He joined Hermione in the library, practiced with Harry, and seemed determined. But enthusiasm wanes. After the initial burst without quick rewards, Ron slipped back into his old habits. Human nature, after all. One Monday at noon, the trio were eating in the Great Hall. "Are you going to the library later?" "You haven't been in 3 days," Hermione reminded him as Ron shoved sausages into his mouth. "Remember what you said last week. Read more. Practice spells." Mouthful, Ron mumbled, "I've been trying for 2 weeks. Give me a few days to rest." He swallowed with effort. His fork clinked against his plate. "I'm not like you. I need to relax. Reading History of Magic isn't relaxing for me." "Oh, suit yourself." Hermione sounded resigned. Harry, watching Ron, shook his head slightly. He'd seen Ron's effort these past weeks. He'd even practiced with Harry every day, but it hadn't lasted. Still, Harry couldn't demand his friend become someone else. He, too, bore the burden of the scar on his forehead and the need to keep getting stronger. He felt it as a private pressure that pushed him onward. After the meal, the three went back to the common room for a short rest. Hermione off to the library, Harry to practice spells. They lounged in armchairs when a commotion in the corridor drew their attention. 2 red-haired figures burst into the room, one carrying a small, fiery red creature. Their eyes brightened when they saw Harry and the others, and they hurried over. "What is it?" Harry asked, sitting up. He froze when he saw the creature in George's hands. The twins wordlessly pushed the thing into Harry's arms. It was a baby fire salamander. Its tail flame was weak, its eyes half closed. It looked like it was dying. "Where did you get it?" Hermione asked, frowning as she examined it. "It's in terrible condition. How long has it been away from fire?" George and Fred exchanged a look. "We found it in the corridor just now," George said. "It was dying. We thought Hagrid could help. You know him." Harry cradled the salamander. Fire salamanders die quickly if they leave fire. But if you feed one chili peppers after it leaves the fire, it can live up to 6 hours. Right now it needs chili peppers, or we could put it straight into a fireplace. "Where do we get chili peppers?" Ron asked. "Go find Hagrid. He has everything." Harry said immediately, already standing. Chapter 326, The Truth About Salamanders. Meanwhile, inside Hagrid's hut, Professor Vincent sat back in a large wooden chair, a steaming cup of tea in hand. Why was he here? 10 minutes earlier, he had finished his Care of Magical Creatures class and was strolling back to the castle along the gravel path when a blast-ended Scroot, Hagrid was raising, appeared and attacked him. The creature posed no real threat to Vincent, but in the scuffle, its tail was severed and it died on the spot. Hagrid didn't seem to mind. After the countless chaotic battles, his collection had been reduced to only 10 Scroots anyway. One less would not matter. "I think blast-ended Scroots are a complete failure," Vincent said, frowning as Hagrid turned over the foul-smelling corpse. "They're ugly, not very bright, dangerous, and even their corpses are useless." "Oh, Professor Vincent, you're quite wrong," Hagrid replied, looking up with a simple, honest smile beneath his thick beard. "I think they're very interesting, and besides, watching them is a good subject in itself." Vincent gave a subtle flick of his wand and muttered an air-freshening charm, a practical little charm he'd picked up from 100 household charms, and the overpowering stench of rotten fish and shrimp dissipated somewhat. "Still, I'd recommend removing them from the syllabus," he said dryly. Hagrid protested with his usual enthusiasm. "Students are tired of the usual creatures. They need something new." "No need," Vincent said, smiling a little. He wanted to keep his standing with the students. Then, abruptly changing the subject, he asked, "How are things going with Madame Maxime?" Hagrid went bright red and stammered. "What do you mean? Aren't you pursuing her?" Vincent raised an eyebrow. "Cough, cough," Hagrid choked, waving his hands. "Where'd you hear that, Professor? I never said." Vincent sipped his tea and said casually, "Everyone thinks so." Hagrid blinked. He'd recently given up his brief attempt at dressing like a gentleman and returned to his old clothes, and Vincent did find the change more approachable. "Do you two have any contact?" Vincent pressed. "We, occasionally write to each other," Hagrid admitted finally, voice barely audible. "Madame Maxime's very proud. Seems to be avoiding me." "Avoiding you? Does she dislike you?" Vincent straightened, delighted by the gossip of colleagues. "No, not at all," Hagrid protested. "We just had a few disagreements about certain things." There was a knock at the door. Hagrid leapt up to answer it, relief plain on his face. Harry and his two friends hurried in, Harry asking as he glanced around, "Hagrid, do you have any chili peppers?" When Harry's eyes landed on Vincent, he paused briefly. Vincent inclined his head in a small nod. Something else caught Vincent's attention, too. The fire salamander clutched in Harry's hand felt off. Hagrid opened a wooden box and took out a good handful of dried chili peppers. He took the salamander from Harry, pried open its mouth with surprising skill, and shoved a few peppers inside. Then he was about to toss it into the fireplace. The salamander let out a piercing shriek. Its body twisted and convulsed, scales flaked away, and it inflated oddly. In a heartbeat, the creature reformed into Neville Longbottom, who collapsed coughing to the floor, face flushed. "Water! Water!" Neville spluttered. "Merlin's beard!" Hagrid cried, knocking over the teapot in his haste. Hot tea splashed everywhere, and Neville sprung up, scalded. Ron waved his wand to conjure water and somehow doused Neville and himself, leaving both soaked. The hut fell into chaos for a few breathless moments before they managed to calm things down. Wrapped in Hagrid's great coat and shivering in a chair, Neville's cheeks still bright with embarrassment, Professor Vincent fixed him with a steady look. "Mr. Longbottom," he said calmly, "can you tell us why you turned into a fire salamander?" All eyes turned to Neville. He was as red as after the chili peppers. "Malfoy gave me a biscuit," he mumbled, barely audible. "Then I turned into that." "Why would you eat something Malfoy gave you?" Ron exploded. "Even Goyle and Crabbe wouldn't just eat something given to them." "I won't comment on Goyle and Crabbe," Hermione said crisply. "But you shouldn't accept food from someone else, especially when that someone is Malfoy." Neville shook his head. "He forced me. He said it was from Hogsmeade." Ron clenched his fists. "Malfoy, just you wait, Neville. No violence, mister," Vincent interrupted, though he did not sound entirely stern. Ron's mouth twisted into a grin anyway. Revenge against Malfoy was never far from his mind. Hagrid muttered under his breath, "The Malfoys never do anything right." Harry's face lit up as he put the pieces together. "It wasn't Malfoy's own prank. It sounds like a shape-shifting biscuit from Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. Fred and George told me about them. Their shop has all kinds of biscuits that turn people into animals. They've been working on more of them lately." "Fred and George told you?" Ron snapped. "They didn't tell me." Harry didn't explain. He'd made a private deal with the twins. If he won the Triwizard Tournament, he would give the 1,000 galleon prize money as startup capital for their shop in exchange for a share. He'd seen some of the twins' inventions before. They were clever and likely to sell. He couldn't live forever on his parents' vault. A little investment now might mean a stable future. He remembered Professor Vincent telling the students they wouldn't need to worry about money after graduation, but it never hurt to plan ahead. Neville looked miserable but relieved. Hermione fussed over him with practical care, while Hagrid apologized profusely, and Vincent, watching the group, allowed himself a small, private smile as the hut settled back into its usual chaotic domesticity. Chapter 326, The Invader of Hogwarts. Harry and the others had afternoon classes and hurried away from Hagrid's hut. Half a minute after they left, a commotion sounded outside. Hagrid, at the window, poked his head out. "What's going on? Who stopped Harry and the others?" "Who?" someone asked. "A woman," Hagrid said after a long squint. Professor Vincent set down his teacup, brow creasing. "I'll go have a look." He stepped out and spotted a woman bedecked in jewelry blocking Harry and his friends. Her gaudy green robes glittered unpleasantly in the sunlight. There was only one person who fit that description, Rita Skeeter. As Professor Vincent approached, her sickly sweet voice floated over. "As a Triwizard champion, Mr. Potter, how did it feel to take first in the first task? Especially since the other champions, ahem." Professor Vincent's soft cough cut off her questioning. Harry turned and felt a rush of relief when he saw who it was. "Professor Vincent," he said immediately, "an outsider's broken into the school." "Hogwarts forbids strangers on the grounds, Madam Invader," Professor Vincent said, eyes hard as he looked at Rita. Rita's smile froze, and even her quick quotes quill stilled. A beat later, she rearranged her expression, a professional countenance. "This isn't an invasion, dear," she said in that cloying tone. "It was only an interview. Our little champion didn't exactly refuse." "I refused," Harry snapped. Rita's smile remained fixed. "Well, you won this round, little rascal," she said. "Seems this isn't a good time for questions. We'll reschedule. Goodbye." She snapped the quill and a notebook closed and turned to leave. "Wait." Professor Vincent's voice was quiet, but it stopped her like an invisible barrier. "Madam Skeeter, I think you've forgotten something. Hogwarts isn't somewhere you come and go as you like." Rita's smile trembled. Professor Vincent cut in with a chuckle that held no humor. "Illegal entry, harassment of underage witches and wizards, and most importantly," his voice went cold, "bringing a suspected dark wizard into the school. I don't know how you did it, but that is extremely serious. It could land you in Azkaban." Those words burst like thunder. Rita's composure finally cracked. She stammered, I don't know what you mean." Professor Vincent's wand slid up and pointed at the empty air behind her. "Revelio." A bright blue flash showed a blurred human silhouette in midair, a man in a black cloak and sunglasses trying to slip away. The figure wavered, turned into a wisp of black smoke, and began to dissolve. Professor Vincent's wand flicked rapidly and snagged only a curl of smoke. "Apparition?" he muttered, narrowing his eyes. "Dark magic. and whoever it was didn't get far. "Who was that?" Harry asked, tense. "You should ask Madam Skeeter," Professor Vincent said. "Keep an eye on her. I'm going after that person." Harry nodded. "I don't know him," Rita cried, voice high and guilty. "I don't know that man. This has nothing to do with me." "Save it for the Aurors," Professor Vincent said without mercy. A sharp cry split the air. Lay, the Thunderbird, swooped down like a bolt. Professor Vincent vaulted onto its back. "Take Skeeter to Dumbledore," he called, and Lay answered with a piercing cry as it shot off toward the forbidden forest, carrying him. Only 4 students and a pale-faced Rita remained. "What do we do?" Ron asked, swallowing hard as he watched Rita like a hawk. "Do as Professor Vincent said," Hermione answered. "Let me go!" Rita suddenly screeched, and surprising everyone, spun and ran. Her stiletto heels slipped over the grass, but she was startlingly quick for someone in such shoes. The sight of a witch running like that left Harry speechless. He drew his wand without thinking. Incarcerus! A rope shot from the tip and wrapped neatly around Rita's legs. She screamed and went down hard. Her notebook and quill skittered across the grass. "Nice!" Ron grinned. Hermione let out a relieved breath. Neville, for his part, looked almost as pale as Rita. "You have no right. This is illegal detention. You can't." Rita wailed from the ground, face twisted. Nobody paid much attention to her protests. Harry felt satisfyingly smug. This irritating pest had finally been stopped, and it seemed she'd been involved in something serious. They didn't yet have proof that the man who'd vanished had been brought in by Rita, but if Professor Vincent caught him, everything would come to light. In Harry's memory, Professor Vincent didn't fail. He was sure this time would be no different. "All right, you 3, Harry told Ron, Hermione, and Neville. "Help me. Wand's out. We'll use a levitation charm to take her to the headmaster's office." They drew their wands. Harry hesitated and turned to Neville. "Neville, put your wand down. I'm worried you might hurt her." Neville's tight face eased. He still wanted to do something, so he crouched and picked up the fallen notebook and quill. The quick quote quill twitched and resisted as if it had a will of its own, wriggling in his hand. 328. The Sharp Sword is Invisible. The Sharp Sword is Invisible. Chapter 327. Sectum Sempra. By the time Harry and the others had Rita Skeeter under control, Vincent was already above the forbidden forest on Lai's back. A tendril of Devil's Snare peeked from his cuff, guiding him. Vincent had nearly worked out what had happened. The man in black had used a rare vanishing charm from the dark arts, turning himself to smoke to make his escape. Vincent wasn't an expert in that branch of magic, but the spell left distinct traces. Devil's Snare could follow them. Turning into smoke didn't look especially sinister at first glance, but Devil's Snare detected an unusually strong dark arts aura. That confirmed it to Vincent. This was a dark wizard. He urged Lay down. "Southeast," he said, narrowing his eyes. Lay understood and dived into the canopy. Branches lashed at Vincent's face. He raised an arm to shield himself. Lay settled on a huge branch, and Vincent peered into the gloom. Devil's Snare shivered violently. "He's close," it warned. Vincent slipped his wand into his hand. Bang! A blinding green light erupted from behind them. Vincent jerked aside. The curse grazed his robe and blew a charred hole through the tree trunk. Killing curse? His eyes went hard and his wand snapped toward the source. He had planned to take the man alive, but the moment a killing curse was used, everything changed. No more holding back. A hoarse, magically warped voice echoed around him, mocking. Vincent ignored it, knowing it was an attempt to distract him, and sent a silent stupefy into the undergrowth. The spell stirred only dead leaves. The attacker wasn't there anymore. Vincent snorted. "Hiding and sneaking isn't a good habit," he muttered. Devil's Snare shot forward, following the dark aura. Then its tendril tightened. Something had been caught. "Got you." Vincent tugged. There was the sound of tearing cloth and a strangled groan. A black shape stumbled out from behind a tree. Half his cloak was ripped away, showing a peculiar silver lining. He was tall and thin, still wearing sunglasses that seemed glued to his face. Devil's Snare coiled him like a rope, hoisting him upside down 3 meters off the ground. His wand clattered to the leaves below. Vincent dropped from Lay and approached slowly. The man struggled briefly, then relaxed as if accepting defeat. "Oh, that's impressive. Can you put me down?" he said, voice oddly casual. Vincent cocked his head. Let me see your face. He flicked his wand and an invisible force tugged the sunglasses free. They slid into Vincent's hand with almost no resistance. Beneath them was an ordinary middle-aged face, pale skin, light brown eyes, sparse brows, so unremarkable he could have blended into a crowd. Vincent paused. "You are?" he began. "You recognized me?" The man asked, panic cracking his voice. "No." Vincent shook his head. "No, I didn't." He leveled his wand. "What's your name?" The question drew only babble in reply. Hearing Vincent hadn't recognized him, the man eased back. "All right, it doesn't matter if you don't want to." Vincent cut him off. "You were hired by that woman Rita Skeeter, weren't you? Answer and I'll let you choose. Die here or spend the rest of your life in Azkaban." The man babbled faster. "Don't, sir, I can explain. One day someone came to me, said he had something important to give me. Very important. I knew it was." He reached subtly for his waist with his right hand as he spoke. Vincent had seen the movement. He didn't hesitate. Sectum sempra. The wand traced a sharp arc. An invisible blade hissed through the air. "No!" The man's right hand was severed at the wrist. It thudded onto the dead leaves along with a spare wand. He screamed, blood spurting, his face draining of color. Vincent ordered Devil's Snare to release the man's feet. He collapsed to the muddy ground and curled up like a wounded animal. Vincent approached, the tip of his wand glowing a dangerous red. "Now," he said coldly, "we can have a proper talk." The wounded man tried to turn and propped himself against the tree, pressing his left hand against the gaping stump. Blood soaked through his fingers. Then he suddenly stared up, his eyes oddly empty. Kill me," he croaked, voice hollow. "Immediately. Kill me." Vincent's pupils tightened. He recognized the look, the mark of Imperius. Not a momentary domination, but a deep, sustained control. This man was someone else's puppet, utterly bent to another's will. Who had him under command? Not Rita. She lacked that power. Vincent's gaze fell to the inside of the man's left wrist. Under the skin, a blurred dark mark showed faintly. The dark mark. Related to Voldemort, then. The man's left veins bulged. His fingers, suddenly iron-strong, clamped around his own throat. His face flushed crimson. His eyes bulged. He was trying to strangle himself. Watching the man turn on himself, a flicker of pity crossed Vincent's face. So, there was only one merciful course. "Sectum sempra," he whispered again. Chapter 328, Lord Voldemort's Warning. The man died cleanly. Vincent's sectum sempra struck his chest and stopped his heart instantly. There was no need to keep him alive any longer. Under such a deep, imperious compulsion, even if the control were broken, his brain would already be ruined, his faculties gone. Worse dangers seemed likely to follow if Vincent didn't finish this quickly. When the spell hit, the man's body convulsed. Pain froze on his face for a moment, then he slid slowly to the floor and lay utterly still. Vincent watched without a sound. Just as he reached to confirm the death, something shifted. The dark mark on the man's left forearm writhed. Black lines crept and twisted up into the air, and in an instant they arranged themselves into a hideous, familiar face, Voldemort's. The projection, woven from the dark arts, opened its eyes, and red pupils bored into Vincent. "Adrian Wisen, I know you," the voice said, bone-chilling and thin. "I know you too, Tom," Vincent answered, with a small, strange smile. Earlier he'd felt a flicker of unease, but seeing the face now brought an odd sense of relief. Voldemort couldn't do anything to him. Not here and not now. This was probably only a message transmitted through the dark mark. When Vincent used the name Tom, the painted face in the air twisted for a moment, and then the voice gave a sound like a snake laughing. "You are bold, sir," it hissed. "Apart from Dumbledore, it's been a long time since anyone dared call me that." "So what state are you in now?" Vincent asked. "A lonely, drifting soul?" Voldemort did not answer directly. "It won't be long. I am about to return," the voice said, full of venom and malice. "Live in fear. You will be the first sacrifice." The face began to contort, then dissolved into the air. Only the corpse on the floor remained, the dark mark still dark on his wrist. Vincent felt no fear, only puzzlement. Had Voldemort gone to this trouble merely to issue a threat? Unfathomable. But one thing was clear. He was now a target. It made sense. He had left his mark on Tom during Harry's first year, and he had already destroyed several of Voldemort's Horcruxes, even if that fact hadn't been discovered. They were destined enemies. Still, Vincent narrowed his eyes. With his interference, Voldemort's resurrection would not be as simple as in the original story. He wrapped the corpse in a sack, conjured by transfiguration, and headed back toward the castle. Rita Skeeter should have already been delivered to Dumbledore by Harry and the others. He needed to bring this body and explain what had happened. Dumbledore probably already suspected the existence of another dark wizard. There were detection spells inside Hogwarts, after all, though Vincent wasn't sure how much that extended beyond the castle walls. In the corridor, a familiar voice floated down from above. "Oh, what are you dragging, Professor?" Peeves, as unruly as ever, hovered over him. No amount of reprimand had tamed the poltergeist. He still liked making trouble. For spectral beings like Peeves, peering into a bag was as easy as sticking their head in. Before Vincent could stop him, Peeves had plunged his head into the sack. When Peeves withdrew, his face went through 3 different expressions in as many heartbeats. Professor, he squealed, then louder. "Inside is a corpse," Vincent said evenly. "Nothing to make a fuss about." Peeves executed 3 somersaults in midair, shrieking. "You're not alive, so corpses shouldn't frighten you," Vincent added, shrugging. Peeves calmed for a moment, grinning. "Just kidding," he said, then mock serious. "You know what to do." Vincent hoped he wouldn't spread word of it. "I understand," Peeves promised, making a zipping motion across his mouth and darting his eyes. Then, as he streaked away, he loudly announced, "Professor killed someone! Professor killed someone!" Vincent sighed. Peeves couldn't be bothered with. Students would likely dismiss the poltergeist's antics anyway. The castle was mostly empty of wandering pupils at that hour. Most were in class. When Vincent reached the headmaster's office, he considered the password for a moment, then the door swung open on its own. Dumbledore must have known he was coming. Vincent climbed the spiral staircase and entered. Dumbledore sat leisurely at his desk, a lemon sherbet in hand, smiling at him. Rita Skeeter sat in an armchair nearby, her garish green robes rumpled and her posture rigid. "Ah, Vincent," Dumbledore greeted. "Would you like a sweet?" "I don't think I have an appetite," Vincent replied, and with a flick of his wand, the sack floated to the center of the office. Its mouth unrolled, revealing the dead man's pallid face, still frozen in a last expression of terror. The scent of blood spread through the room. Rita's scream was high and short, near hysteria. This, she choked, words dissolving into gasps as she scrambled away from the open sack. 3:30, results and dance. "Calm down, Miss Skeeter." Dumbledore glanced at the corpse with a solemn look, then rose and walked over to Professor Vincent. "Professor Vincent, can you tell me exactly what happened?" Vincent gave a succinct account, including the appearance of Lord Voldemort's dark mark. When the name Tom came up, Dumbledore's eyes flickered behind his half-moon spectacles. "Interesting," he said. "It seems Tom is particularly fond of you." He turned his gaze to Rita Skeeter. "Do you have anything to say, Miss Skeeter?" Dumbledore asked gently. "Professor Vincent suspects you brought that dark wizard into Hogwarts." Rita's eyes widened. She shook her head so hard it was a little theatrical. "I swear I don't know anything. I only came for an interview. Dark wizards? How could I possibly be involved with them, let alone bring one into Hogwarts?" "Is that so?" Dumbledore's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made Rita feel suddenly very small. "Yes!" she blurted, faster than she ever had in her life. Vincent, privately, sighed. He was fairly certain Rita had brought the dark wizard in, but the dark wizard was now dead and the evidence had disappeared. Dumbledore understood that he could not leap to conclusions without proof. "I cannot jump to conclusions without evidence, Miss Skeeter," he said. Rita visibly relaxed and patted her chest with a dramatic sigh. "Thank you for your understanding, Headmaster Dumbledore. I knew you were the fairest." "However," Dumbledore interrupted gently, "entering Hogwarts without permission is not allowed." Rita's smile froze. "According to regulations," Dumbledore went on, still polite, "uninvited visitors must undergo certain inspections, which are conducted by the Ministry of Magic." "I've never heard of such a regulation," Rita said, her face pinching. "It was introduced for the Tri-Wizard tournament," Dumbledore replied, blinking. "If you have questions, you can speak to Bagman or Crouch." Rita blinked, then gave herself a stiff little nod. "Very well, I will cooperate." A small inspection, she could handle that, she told herself. It was a basic skill for a good reporter. And she had already hidden all the clues. They wouldn't find any evidence. Still, she had regrets. She hadn't planned to kill Professor Wisen, only to teach him a lesson, to warn him. She hadn't realized it had anything to do with Death Eaters. This could be a huge story. Dumbledore nodded. Bagman is still at Hogwarts. Professor McGonagall will take you for the inspection. Be prepared. Soon McGonagall arrived. Dumbledore had sent for her with a Patronus and led Rita away. That left only Wisen and Dumbledore alone in the headmaster's office, with the corpse lying where it had been dropped. Dumbledore returned to his chair and asked seriously, "When Tom appeared before you, what did he say?" "Mostly threats," Wisen said after a moment. "He did say that the day of his resurrection was not far off." "We know that," Dumbledore said, frowning slightly. "Anything else?" Wisen shook his head. "And this man?" He nodded toward the corpse. "Do you know his identity?" Wisen looked at the body and shook his head. Then, remembering the 2 wands he had taken from the dark wizard earlier, he produced them and turned them over in his hands. "Perhaps Mr. Ollivander might recognize their owners. He can identify the makers and sometimes remember owners." Ollivander could not identify the owners. Not because he was incapable, but because the wands had belonged to people long dead. That he could recall the wands at all was, Wisen thought, quite impressive. After that, Wisen decided not to concern himself further with the corpse. He left those messy details to Dumbledore. The matter of Rita Skeeter, he judged, would likely end in a small fine, no serious consequence for someone like her. In his private thoughts, he leaned toward believing Rita had brought the Dark Wizard in deliberately, rather than under coercion. For a moment, he considered exposing her animagus identity just to give her a bit of trouble, but he let the idea go. He might have reason to make use of her in print later. It was better to keep such leverage intact. Time moved on. By mid-December, snow had been settling on the castle for some time. The turrets and battlements were white, the corridor windows frosted over, and the black lake had turned to a sheet of silver. With the snow came the approach of Christmas. 10 days before Christmas, the students were given exciting news. In keeping with Triwizard Tournament tradition, there would be a grand ball on Christmas Eve, and students above the 4th year were expected to find partners. That afternoon, Harry was in the Gryffindor common room, arguing the situation over with his friends. "Professor McGonagall said I have to lead the dance as a champion," he complained. "I can't dance at all." "Me neither," Ron said vaguely. "I know a little." Before Hermione could finish, Harry and Ron both turned to her with curious looks. "When did you learn?" Harry asked. "My mother taught me," Hermione replied. "Oh," Ron muttered, and then added without thinking, "I can't imagine you dancing, Hermione." Hermione's face flushed and she bristled. "Fine, Ron," she snapped. "Don't expect me to teach you." She left the common room in a huff. Harry watched her go, then looked at Ron in some concern. "Did you upset her?" "No." Ron scratched his head, puzzled. "What would I have done?" Chapter 330, Ron and Malfoy. Aside from the ball itself, choosing a partner was Harry and Ron's biggest headache. "So, who are you going to ask?" Ron asked, worried. "I'm not sure yet," Harry said casually. "I thought so," Ron sighed. "Not only do we need partners, but we also need robes. Mum's probably going to send me something secondhand, or worse." Harry wasn't worried about robes. Professor Wisen had taken him shopping over the summer and already bought him a set. His professor had clearly anticipated the need. 2 days later, Ron's worries came true. At breakfast, he received a parcel from Mrs. Weasley. When the old owl dropped it on the table, Ron made a sour face. He stared at the bulging brown package like it might bite. "What is it?" Harry asked. "A major problem," Ron said, hands trembling as he untied the string. An old, odd smell puffed out with a cloud of dust. Hermione, reading nearby, sneezed. "Oh no." Ron produced a dark purplish-red robe with puffed sleeves trimmed in yellowing lace. "I can't wear this to the ball," he groaned. "It's probably older than Gran. How will the girls look at me?" Hermione snorted. Ron was in no mood to argue with her. She'd been unusually prickly the last 2 days, and he didn't want to broach whatever was wrong. Harry tried to cheer him up. "Maybe it's vintage? Could be fashionable. If you like, I can help you get a different one." "Forget it," Ron cut in. He'd had enough favors from Harry. He didn't want to feel indebted again. He knew too much charity could sour a friendship. Then something worse happened. Draco Malfoy had slipped up behind them with Crabbe and Goyle in attendance, wearing that mocking smirk. "Well, Weasley," Malfoy drawled, eyes glittering, "is that your robe? Looks like your mother finally dug out a family heirloom. Did she pull it from a house elf's old trunk?" Ron went bright red, knuckles white on the robe. Harry rose to block him. "What do you want, Malfoy, if you're looking for trouble?" "Oh, relax, Potter." Malfoy spread his hands in a mock surrender. "I only came to see Weasley, and—" He flicked his gaze toward Neville, who sat nearby. "Want some more biscuits, Longbottom?" Neville flinched. His last dreadful experience, something about turning into a fire salamander, had left him jumpy, and Hagrid's surprisingly spicy chili had swollen his lips for days. Seeing Neville flinch, Malfoy sneered, "Coward," and laughed. Crabbe and Goyle joined in. Ron slammed his hand down on the table and stood up. The long wooden table rattled. The whole great hall went silent, all eyes on them. "Malfoy!" Ron's voice trembled. "I want to duel you. Now!" Malfoy pretended surprise and took a half-step back, but a triumphant smile was on his face. "Oh, duel me?" He looked at the robe in Ron's hand. "Wearing that rag of yours?" Crabbe and Goyle cackled again. Harry grabbed Ron's arm. "Ron, don't fall for it." "No, Harry." Ron shrugged Harry off. "Leave it to me this time." Harry thought, this could go badly. Just then, the doors swung open. Professor McGonagall marched in, her sharp gaze immediately fixed on the commotion. "What is going on here?" she demanded. "Hush, there's to be no shouting in the Great Hall. It's most unseemly." The hall fell silent. Malfoy wiped his sneer away quickly. Crabbe and Goyle froze. Ron calmed. McGonagall was not someone to be trifled with. "Professor," Harry rushed in, "it was just about the Christmas ball." McGonagall's eyes swept over the crumpled robe in Ron's hand and then lingered on Malfoy. "I'll take your word for that for now," she said. A few people sighed with relief. Losing house points over this would have been too costly. Malfoy and his cronies slunk back to the Slytherin table. "Mr. Potter, remember to find a partner in advance," McGonagall warned Harry. "I do not want Hogwarts disgraced at the ball." "Yes, Professor," Harry answered. "If you have difficulty, speak with Professor Wisen. He is your head of house." As soon as McGonagall left the hall, Malfoy sauntered back from the Slytherin table, his fake smile back in place. Harry said through his teeth, "What do you want now?" Malfoy paid him no mind and turned to Ron. "Let's go somewhere else, Weasley," he said casually. "Didn't you say you wanted to duel me?" "All right, Malfoy." Ron's voice was unexpectedly steady. "If you're not scared, then let's go. Hope you haven't forgotten the taste of slugs." Malfoy looked taken aback at Ron's readiness, but quickly resumed his arrogant posture. Harry reached for him, but Ron was already on his feet, heading for the door with Malfoy. Hermione and Harry exchanged a quick look and hurried after. Crabbe and Goyle lumbered behind them. Neville hesitated, then stood as well. This duel seemed tied to him somehow, and he felt a sudden surge of admiration for Ron. He doubted he would have the nerve to face Malfoy himself. Chapter 331. Levitation Charm. A group of students made their way to an open clearing by the edge of the Forbidden Forest, where a thin crust of snow still lay on the ground. The place was remote and rarely visited, the perfect spot for settling scores. After making sure no one was around, Ron and Malfoy stood in the center of the clearing facing each other. Harry leaned toward Hermione and asked quietly, "Do you think Ron can beat Malfoy?" "It has nothing to do with me," Hermione said flatly, crossing her arms. Harry said no more and fixed his gaze on the two boys. Hermione had been acting odd for the past 2 days, and she was clearly on edge, but she'd come anyway. She cared enough to be here. Malfoy drew his wand with a lazy flourish. "Simple rules," he said. "Whoever is knocked down first or gives up loses." Ron gripped his wand, jaw set. "Suits me. This is a duel between the two of us. No one interferes." He shot a glare at Crabbe and Goyle behind Malfoy. "Of course," Malfoy replied, though he glanced at Harry with a hint of unease. Harry was the sort of person who could defeat a dragon, and that made Malfoy wary. Still, a small Weasley was another matter. Neville swallowed nervously. Harry felt a twinge of worry, too. Ron and Malfoy had dueled before, but now they were fourth years. The spells they knew were more dangerous than before. "Ready, Weasley?" Malfoy teased. "Don't cry to Mummy when you lose." "I'm not you, Malfoy," Ron shot back. "Less talk." Malfoy's face went cold. He flicked his wand. "Denso, A blue jet of light shot toward Ron's face. Ron dodged, but the spell grazed his ear and struck a nearby tree. The bark swelled into ugly pustules. Densojo, the charm that made a person's front teeth grow grotesquely long, wasn't lethal, but it was extremely effective. Swollen fangs could ruin a witch or wizard's ability to cast properly. Hermione watched, lips pressed together. Ron recovered his stance and countered quickly. Ric Decempra, Malfoy waved a hand dismissively. Protego, a translucent shield flared up, and Ron's spell struck it, sparking before fizzing out. Malfoy smirked. The probing's over, Weasley. Now it's time to begin. He flicked his wand in quick succession, and a storm of spells came at Ron. Expelliarmus! Expelliarmus! Stupefy! Ron scrambled to dodge, rolling awkwardly through mud and snow. He barely raised a shield charm for the last attack and panted for breath. Harry saw Ron was in trouble. In spite of past scuffles, these two were on different levels in a formal duel. Ron was outmatched. Malfoy's confidence swelled. A smug sneer curled his lip. What, Weasley? Out of breath already? Is that all you've got? Less talk, Malfoy. Ron snapped, face flushed with anger. He lashed out, but Malfoy sidestepped easily. Then, with a crisp shout, Levicorpus. The levitation charm, a favorite prank among Hogwarts students, struck Ron in the chest before he could react. He felt his stomach drop as invisible hands hoisted his feet into the air. His wand slipped from his grasp and tumbled to the ground. His robes flipped up, leaving him dangling upside down in his underwear. Ha! Malfoy and his cronies exploded with laughter. Get the camera, Goyle! This is worth a photo. Goyle fumbled for a camera. They'd come prepared. Harry didn't want that image to spread. It would humiliate Ron permanently and ruin his prospects for the Christmas ball. Quick as he could, Harry flicked his wand. Expelliarmus! He wasn't sure if a camera counted as a weapon, but a flash of red light took it from Goyle's hand and sent it arcing into Harry's. Goyle looked baffled, then around in confusion. Ron hung upside down, face beet red and furious. Put me down, Malfoy, he struggled. Harry sighed. Ron had lost. As his friend, he wanted to intervene, but this was Ron's duel, one-on-one, and Harry had to respect that. Suddenly, a cold voice cut through the chaos. What are you doing? Everyone froze. Professor Snape glided out from behind a tree like some black-winged creature. His gaze skimmed over Harry holding the camera, over Malfoy and his cronies, and finally fixed on the upside-down Ron. With a flick of his wand, the Levicorpus charm was broken, and Ron dropped with a thud into the snow. He scrambled to his feet, face grim as he brushed off his robes. I assume you all have a good explanation for the scene I just witnessed, Snape said, his voice like a snake. Malfoy stepped forward with a practiced smile and a slight bow. Professor, we were merely practicing spells in a friendly way. Practical experience is important, I'm sure you understand. He looked challengingly at Harry and the others, confident that as head of Slytherin, Snape would be lenient. Everyone, 10 points from Gryffindor, Snape said coldly. Malfoy's smile froze. Wait, had he heard Snape correctly? Chapter 332, The Agreed Challenge. 40 points were taken from Gryffindor and 30 from Slytherin, penalties proportionate to the number of students involved. Malfoy had, as an extra measure, been given detention by Snape. On the walk back to the castle, Harry still found it hard to believe. Snape actually took points from Malfoy, he said, puzzled. That's odd. Any idea why? Hermione and Neville shook their heads together. Ron, by contrast, looked completely deflated. He seemed to have lost his soul. Harry felt helpless watching him. Don't be too down, Ron, Neville tried, awkwardly. Even though you lost, he didn't have it easy either, and... That's not comforting at all, Harry cut in, nudging Neville with his elbow. Neville shut up and looked embarrassed. They had unconsciously drifted to the center of the courtyard when a few late snowflakes began to fall, the wind picking up. The scene felt bleak. A group of pale blue cloaks drifted past them. A blizzard's coming, girls, a familiar voice called. Best get back to the castle or your carriages. I'm off. Have a pleasant day. See you tomorrow, Roskin. Harry realized it was the Beauxbaton students, and the voice belonged to Professor Wisen. Vincent saw them, finished seeing off the Beauxbatons, and walked over, smiling. What are you doing out here? He asked. Ron, you look awful. What happened? You look like someone who's just lost a duel. Vincent expected a flippant answer. Instead, none of them answered, and Ron bowed his head further until his face was hidden. After a few seconds, he muttered, "I'm going back. Goodbye, Professor," and ran off toward the castle. Vincent blinked. "What happened?" "You hit a nerve, Professor," Hermione said helplessly. Harry told Vincent everything that had just occurred. The professor was quiet for a moment. He swore it had been an unintentional remark. He hadn't expected it to actually hit home. Still, children were fragile, especially teenagers, and emotions ran high. He sighed. "I suppose I should go and see to him," Harry said, worried, "or help him teach Malfoy a lesson." "As a professor, I don't recommend violence," Vincent murmured with a wink. "Do as you like, but don't go too far." Hermione spoke up. "We shouldn't seek revenge for him," she said calmly. "Ron has to beat Malfoy himself, unless he's completely lost his self-respect and confidence." Harry was surprised Hermione would say that now. "That's not easy," he said. "I know," she sighed, "which is why we need to help him." "I thought you weren't talking to him recently," Harry said, surprised. Hermione pouted. "I haven't been avoiding him. I just can't stand how lazy he's been." Harry raised an eyebrow. Was that why Hermione had been in a sour mood lately? Girls could be baffling. Still, as long as they weren't fighting, it was fine. Ron and Hermione were both important to him. "You're right," he said. "First, we need to give Ron some drive." Vincent watched them, relieved. It looked like Ron's spirits were no longer Vincent's sole worry. "Hatred's a good motivator," he said with a small grin, then looked up at the sky. "Ah, this blizzard's getting worse. I don't like it. Time to go, children." Back in the common room, Harry and Hermione began searching for Ron. Lunchtime came and went. There was still no sign of him. At the Gryffindor table, Harry sighed. "Where could he be? I checked the boys' dormitory. He isn't there. Not in the tower either." Hermione frowned. "I checked the library, though I doubt he's in the mood to read, and the owlery. He isn't there." "He wouldn't have gone to find Malfoy alone, would he?" Harry sat up straighter, alarmed. That would be a terrible idea. But knowing Ron, it wasn't impossible. As they talked, Malfoy strode past the Gryffindor table with Crabbe and Goyle, his silver and green scarf draped over his chest. "Well, Potter," he sneered, "where's your little sidekick? Hiding in a corner sobbing, is he?" Harry stiffened, but Hermione pressed his wrist under the table to keep him from answering. Then she stood up, voice unusually steady. "Malfoy," she said, "since you like dueling so much, would you have another one with me?" Malfoy blinked, then laughed. "You really want to humiliate yourself? Haven't you seen what happened to Weasley? No thanks. I don't duel mudbloods." Hermione's face didn't change. "So you won't accept a challenge from a mudblood?" Malfoy sneered. "I don't have time for mudblood games. If you want revenge, let that red-haired boy come find me. I'll be happy to oblige." He smirked at Harry. "And I'll film it too. You can watch your friend get humiliated all over again." Before Harry could respond, an angry, familiar voice rang out. "Malfoy!" Ron appeared, hair like a bonfire under the torchlight, and stopped in front of them all. "Fine," he said, his voice low and steady. "We'll have another duel, the day after the next Triwizard task, witnessed by all the students." Harry opened his mouth to protest that the professors would never allow it, but this was clearly not the time. Malfoy raised an eyebrow. "If you're that keen to be humiliated again, I accept." Ron let out a quiet, almost imperceptible sigh of relief. Chapter 333, and it will be next year. Things moved faster than anyone had expected. Ron actually challenged Malfoy to another duel, this time scheduled for 2 months hence. As Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle swaggered away, Ron sank down beside Harry with a strained look. "That was too impulsive," Harry whispered. "This is clearly Malfoy trying to provoke you. He just wants to make you look bad in front of everyone." "There are 2 whole months," Ron said seriously. "I might not lose. Besides, he called Hermione a mudblood." "I didn't take it to heart at all," Hermione said without looking up, a small smile on her lips. "But he really deserves a lesson, Ron." Ron nodded, then turned to Harry with an unusually solemn expression. "Harry, can you help me practice dueling?" Harry blinked, then grinned. "Of course, 2 months is more than enough to change a lot." At that very moment, Vincent was stepping through the castle gates and was intercepted by Professor McGonagall. "Professor Dumbledore wants to see you," she said briskly. "He said it's important." Vincent pushed open the heavy door to the headmaster's office. Dumbledore was bent over a large sheet of parchment at his desk. "Ah, you're here, Vincent," he said, looking up and adjusting his half-moon spectacles. "I've been expecting you. Professor McGonagall had some trouble finding me," Vincent said as he approached, eyes drifting to the map spread on the desk. "Is that?" "A map," Dumbledore confirmed. "I'm searching for something important." Vincent scanned it quickly. It looked like a map of central and southern Britain. After a moment's thought, he offered, "Let me guess. Is it to do with Lord Voldemort? A Horcrux?" Dumbledore's finger hovered over the parchment. "You have a keen eye, Vincent," he said. There was an intensity about the headmaster that made Vincent think only matters connected to Voldemort could command such concentration. "But that isn't why I summoned you." "Then," Dumbledore rose and walked to the window. "Do you remember the dark wizard you captured 10 days ago?" Vincent felt his heart quicken. "There's news?" "Yes." Dumbledore turned back. "Do you know Theodore Nott?" Vincent thought of the thin, reserved Slytherin in Harry's year, someone he barely knew, a member of one of the old sacred 28 families. "Is he connected to that dark wizard?" "That dark wizard was Theodore Nott's father," Dumbledore said quietly. Old Nott was one of the earliest Death Eaters to follow Lord Voldemort. After Voldemort's downfall, he, like some others, managed, by whatever means, to avoid Azkaban. Vincent nodded. It fit the tragic pattern of those who had followed Voldemort, used and then discarded. "How did you deal with him, Professor? And Theodore? How is he?" Dumbledore's face grew grave. "Theodore probably doesn't know yet. I will tell him that his father was taken under Imperius and then killed. There isn't even a body to show him." "No body?" Vincent echoed. He remembered the prisoner with a missing hand and was puzzled. "After I had the identity confirmed, the body spontaneously combusted," Dumbledore said. "Some sort of self-destructing dark magic, quite ingenious." "I didn't detect that magic," and Vincent admitted. "It was released through the dark mark, something no one expected," Dumbledore said. "And I haven't told anyone else about this. Only you and one reporter know the truth for now." "The Ministry?" Vincent asked, surprised. It seemed obvious such a thing should be handed over to the Ministry. "The Ministry is not reliable at the moment," Dumbledore said sharply. "We know the Death Eaters are stirring again, but there are many muddle-headed people, and worse, who would misinterpret this. If someone like Fudge got hold of it, he would refuse to make the connection to Voldemort." "So how did Rita Skeeter find Theodore Nott?" Vincent asked. Dumbledore adjusted his glasses. 2 days ago, I questioned Miss Skeeter again. The session was unpleasant, but I learned she had posted a job in an underground trading circle, looking for Mr. Nott. Vincent snorted. What a fool. He thought it over, and then everything clicked into place. After he had mentioned details that only someone who knew Rita's animagus form would know, Rita had managed to set a task in the underground market, seeking someone to deal with the Dark Wizard. A Death Eater answered it, and the rest followed. Vincent had to admit, a casual remark of his had started a chain reaction he never intended. Dumbledore poured them both tea. They sat in silence for a moment before the headmaster spoke again. "I've been considering asking you to join the Order of the Phoenix." Vincent looked up, startled. "The Order of the Phoenix? Hasn't it been disbanded?" Dumbledore smiled faintly. "I never said it was gone, only dormant for a time. I intend to rebuild it, to prepare for what is coming." The offer was tempting. Ending Voldemort's threat had always been one of Vincent's aims. But he had a heavier question on his mind. "Professor Dumbledore," he said slowly, "are you sure Lord Voldemort will return?" Dumbledore was silent for a long beat. Then, with a calm certainty that made the room feel colder, he said, "I'm sure, and it will be next year." Chapter 334, The Coming Next Year? A hint of surprise flashed across Professor Vincent's face. He had no idea how Dumbledore had settled on that particular time. Judging by the headmaster's serious expression, it wasn't a joke. "Is it Professor Trelawney's prophecy?" Vincent asked tentatively. Dumbledore shook his head. "Not exactly. It's something else." He paused, then abruptly changed the subject. "All right, Professor Vincent, back to the matter at hand. Will you join us?" Faced with the sudden shift, Vincent shrugged helplessly. If Dumbledore wasn't going to push it, there wasn't much he could do. "I'll seriously consider joining the Order of the Phoenix," he said, "if necessary." Dumbledore seemed to have expected that reply. "We have time. Take it." After closing the serious topic, he smiled and brought up the upcoming Christmas ball. I hear our champion isn't exactly ready for the ball yet, Professor Vincent. If I'm not mistaken, Harry hasn't learned to dance. He added with a twinkle, as the Tri-Wizard Tournament's guiding professor, you can't let our champion make a fool of himself. Wait, Vincent pointed at himself, surprised. That's part of my job too? Oh, of course, Dumbledore said, glancing at him, especially after the considerable bonus you received. Go on, Professor Vincent. There's still a week. That should be enough time. Vincent rubbed his temples. To be honest, he was a terrible dancer. He could perform precise footwork in a duel, but dancing, not graceful at all. His sister used to joke that he moved like a stiff doll whenever she dragged him onto a dance floor. Still, he got along with people and could usually find someone willing to help. He would manage. 2 days later, Professor Vincent found Harry alone at the Gryffindor table in the Great Hall. Harry was poking at a fried egg with his fork and staring blankly at the candlelight, clearly not paying attention to his breakfast. He only looked up when Vincent put a hand on his shoulder. Everything all right? Vincent asked. Harry forced a small smile. If anyone could be trusted with some of his worries, it was Vincent. It's about a dance partner, he said carefully. I've had a lot of invitations the last 2 days, and I turned them all down. Vincent's eyebrows lifted. So, what are you worried about? Harry scratched the back of his head. I don't know. I don't want it to be bad. How many girls have you turned down? Vincent asked. Harry thought for a moment. If you counted the third-year Hufflepuff and the fifth-year Ravenclaw just now, 23, he said. Vincent was silent for a beat, then said slowly, That's quite an impressive number. Harry smiled helplessly. Maybe it was his performance in the Tri-Wizard Tournament, or maybe he wasn't completely unattractive. Either way, he'd become popular. So what's your plan? Vincent asked with a grin. Don't be shy. As the professor who knows you best, let me guess, the girl Harry Potter wants to invite is Cho Chang from Ravenclaw. Harry shot upright so fast his ears reddened. Don't talk about that, Professor, he stammered. Vincent laughed. He'd only been teasing. It was better to drop the subject before it embarrassed Harry any further. Speaking of which, where are your friends? Ron and Hermione, Harry sighed. Ron had finally found a direction and a drive, but lately it had turned into something of an obsession. He'd be waking up in the middle of the night to read dueling manuals, practicing stances in the common room, and pulling out his wand to silently recite spells while eating. They were sitting here 5 minutes ago, Harry said. Then Ron leapt up, made this strange yell, and went outside to practice spells. Hermione thinks he might need to see Madame Pomfrey about his head. Sounds like harmless excitement, Vincent commented. He hoped it was only a phase. If it wasn't too long-lived, it could be a positive thing. Harry nodded. So what did you come to see me about, Professor? Oh, nothing major, Vincent said lightly. But as your guiding professor for the tournament, I think you need some special training. Special training? Harry's eyes brightened. Of course, no problem. Excellent. Vincent smiled. Come to my office this afternoon after potions. I'll have everything ready. Potions had been dreadful that morning. Snape's dislike for Harry had never been subtle, and lately his temper had been shorter than usual. Potter, tell me, what do you do after adding fish eyes? Snape's roar still echoed in Harry's head. Harry had been carefully adding hellebore syrup to the cauldron when the shout made his hand tremble, and he tipped the whole bottle in at once. On top of that, Seamus Finnegan was his partner and had been stirring at the time. The cauldron had exploded, splattering Neville's face. For that, Harry and Seamus had been docked 10 points. It all felt unfair. Harry stood in front of Vincent's office door, took a deep breath, smoothed his expression, and knocked. Come in, Vincent called. Harry pushed the door open and stopped dead. The normally modest office had been enlarged by an extension charm until it was almost as big as the Great Hall. Office supplies were stacked in one corner, and several oddly shaped mannequins stood in the middle of the newly spacious room. Vincent was at one of them, adjusting something with a small wand. Harry hurried across the room. Chapter 336, Special Combat Training? So it really is combat training? Harry stared at the line of practice dummies and thought back to the ones Vincent had shown him before. They were similar, able to simulate attacks and defenses, excellent for training. Still, he found himself scanning the huge room. Was such a space necessary? Was his next opponent going to be a giant? A dragon? No, that couldn't be right. He remembered the words of the merpeople's song. Could it be a giant squid? That made less sense. There wasn't a single drop of water here. While Harry's imagination ran wild, Vincent finished adjusting the dummies and smiled. The special training is about to begin. I actually invited Cedric Diggory at first, but once I saw his true level, I decided he doesn't need this. What? Harry's eyes widened. Cedric was that strong? Vincent seemed sure of his judgment. Harry felt the pressure to catch up. I also had Professor Flitwick help design these dummies, Vincent continued. He told me he was top of his field back when he was younger. Harry nodded. He knew Flitwick had been a dueling master in his youth. Let's start, he said, rubbing his hands together, excitement and a sharp edge in his eyes. I can't wait, Professor. Vincent looked pleased at his enthusiasm. Oh, right. Before we begin, I'd like you to transfigure a face onto one of them. Anyone you prefer. I want to see if your transfiguration is up to par. Harry glanced at the dummy's bald, featureless head. An impish idea popped into his mind. He drew his wand and flicked it. A silver light flashed, and the blank face began to take shape. Within seconds, a spiky, angular face had formed. Pale blonde hair, gray eyes, a pointed chin, Draco Malfoy. Harry inspected his handiwork with a satisfied nod. The features were a little rough, but for his level it was good. He couldn't wait to have a proper duel with Draco Malfoy. When he looked up at Vincent, though, the professor had a strange expression. What's wrong? Harry asked. A bad feeling crept over him. Vincent frowned, then forced a smile. Oh, nothing. Well, it's a bit odd, but if you like it, that's fine. Harry adopted a dueling stance, wand aimed at the dummy's chest, knees bent and ready to dodge. Wait, Harry, Vincent said, and gently put a hand on his shoulder. You might have misunderstood something. Misunderstood? This is combat training, isn't it? Vincent's expression grew awkward. He hadn't explained the details. No wonder Harry assumed a normal combat drill. He flicked his wand and activated the dummy. It spun smoothly, and a dark green formal robe trimmed with silver stars appeared on its body. The dummy extended a hand toward Harry. I forgot to tell you, Vincent suppressed a laugh. This is actually dance training. For a moment, the room fell silent. Harry looked at the Malfoy dummy, his face folding into disgust. Dance with Malfoy? He would rather die. Vincent, seeing his reaction, explained. Professor Flitwick said he was very good at dancing when he was young. The dummy he designed can simulate different dance partners. Harry gaped. Flitwick had more tricks than he'd thought, but he absolutely refused to practice dancing with a dummy wearing Malfoy's face. Vincent understood instantly and waved his wand. The Malfoy features melted and blurred back into a blank mask. All right, he said kindly. Try again. Harry breathed in relief. Now whose face should he pick? He flitted through the possibilities and felt increasingly annoyed. Finally, he waved his wand casually. A silver light softened the dummy's features. Long black hair framed a pair of bright eyes, and a faint smile curved the lips. Very good taste, Vincent said with a smile. He thought the face resembled Cho Chang. Harry felt a flush of relief and a new nervousness, sharper than when he faced the dragon. I hope you're ready, Vincent said. To make you less nervous, I prepared a suitable environment. The surroundings blurred, and in the next breath, Harry was standing in the center of a magnificent ballroom. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across painted ceilings, portraits watched from the walls, elegant music drifted through the air. This is a scene inside the Beauxbatons' carriage, Vincent explained. Perfect for dancing practice. The chandeliers, pillars, and paintings are all illusions. The practice proceeded surprisingly well, apart from the ruined shoes on the dummy's feet. Flitwick's design was impressive. Even as Harry fumbled like a newborn giraffe, the dummy never lost its poise and patience. It returned step after step with perfect timing and grace. A major advantage of a mechanical partner, Harry thought wryly. It never got angry. When he left, Harry felt oddly less nervous than before, not because his footwork had suddenly improved, but because Vincent had taught him a special spell at the end of the session. It was an improved version of Tarantallegra, dancing magic that allowed him to control his limbs with precision. When Harry asked why he hadn't been taught this earlier, Vincent shrugged. I forgot, he said casually. Harry stared and felt a little helpless. Chapter 336, Be Careful, Karkaroff. December 24th. The blizzard that had raged for days had finally died down, leaving Hogwarts buried under a thick, glittering blanket of snow. Inside the castle, though, the mood was anything but peaceful. The Christmas ball was tomorrow, and everyone was buzzing with nervous excitement. Harry had finally picked a partner, Parvati Patil, who was in his year. It wasn't that he felt strongly, he'd simply been unable to decide, so he picked who he thought was the prettiest. He'd tried asking Cho Chang first, though she was a year above him. Unfortunately, Cedric had beaten him to it. He'd apparently invited her on the very first day the ball was announced. Pretty bold. Ron, on the other hand, had completely forgotten. "I did tell you," Hermione said from her armchair when Ron burst into the common room, flustered and guilty. "I reminded you too," Harry added, helpless. Ron flopped onto a chair. "I've been practicing," he said miserably. "I'm going to beat Malfoy in our duel tomorrow." He'd been using almost every spare minute swinging his bat and practicing. When someone really wants something, other things fade into background. "What are you going to do?" Ron begged Harry and Hermione. Harry looked to Hermione. "I thought you two might go together." "No," Hermione said with a shrug. "That would be rather odd." "Yeah," Ron pouted. "It would be like leaving you out." "Hey, Hermione, your teeth look straighter." Hermione covered her mouth instinctively, then lowered her hand. "I had to make some preparations," she said calmly. "It is the ball." "Who invited you?" Harry asked. "A secret," Hermione said lightly, deflecting. "Right now we should be thinking about Ron. It'd be sad if you had no partner." Harry racked his brains, then brightened. "Ron, you could ask Padma. She's Parvati's twin and in Ravenclaw. I don't think she has a date." "Padma? I barely speak to her," Ron protested. Hermione rolled her eyes. "This isn't the time to be choosy, Ron, unless you plan to stand alone in the corner tomorrow." "She's really nice," Harry encouraged. "She even helped me pick up a porcupine quill I dropped in potions." Ron ran a hand through his unruly red hair, torn like someone deliberating over a complicated potion. He wasn't thinking about Padma, the object of romance, just the awkwardness. "All right," he said at last. "I'll try. I'm not very confident, though." An hour later, Ron had succeeded, to Harry's quiet surprise. Christmas morning, Harry and Ron sat cross-legged by their four-poster beds, opening presents. Ron held up a book and blinked. "Wand-waving is fashion. Glamorize your clothes with magic? Why didn't someone give you that a few days earlier?" Harry said. "It's a Christmas present," Ron grumbled, checking the signature on the wrapping. "Professor Wisen. You could try some of the charms," Harry suggested. "Or ask Hermione. She picks things up so fast." "Oh, don't." Ron waved a hand and started flipping through the book. "Let's see if I can turn my shabby robes into something worth wearing tonight." Harry inspected his own gifts. A large bag of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans from Ron. The wrapper boasted new flavors like anger and bitterness. Hermione's copy of Advanced Defensive Spells Illustrated, Hagrid's enormous rock cakes that looked like they could be used as shields, and several packages from classmates he didn't really know. The problem with being famous was that people he barely recognized sent things, and he never knew what to send back, or even who to thank. He hesitated to open some parcels, suspecting they might be hexed. After all, not everyone liked him. Some people had openly wished him harm. It was better to let experienced hands check them. Among the gifts, he found a small, crumpled note. He unfolded it. The handwriting was sharp and hurried. "Be careful, Karkaroff." There was another fragment, and everyone from Durmstrang. So it read, in full, "Be careful, Karkaroff, and everyone from Durmstrang." Harry frowned. Who'd sent that? Dumbledore? Professor Wisen? Hagrid? He turned the note over, puzzling. "Ron," he whispered, handing it across. "Look at this." Ron read it, and his face shifted. "Be careful, Karkaroff? Isn't he the headmaster of Durmstrang?" "Keep your voice down," Harry murmured, glancing toward the sleeping shape of Neville. "Sirius told me before that Karkaroff had been a Death Eater." "Then this could be from Sirius?" Ron asked in a lowered tone. "No, Sirius's handwriting is messier, and he'd sign it," Harry said, examining the paper again. "Maybe a professor. In any case, being warned isn't bad." Harry pinched the note between two fingers and summoned a small flame in his palm, burning the paper to ash. Ron stared. What was that?" A wandless, nonverbal flame charm, Harry said with a hint of pride. I've been practicing. It's a bit like a muggle lighter. Do you know what that is? It's a little tool they use to start fires. You press and a flame comes out. That's brilliant, Ron said, more than a little envious. He still had some catching up to do. After they counted their presents, the three of them went down to the common room. Hermione was already there, sitting with her own pile. "Merry Christmas," she said when they arrived. "So, what are we doing today?" "Nothing at all," Ron said, sinking down next to her. "Just waiting for the ball tonight." "Exactly," Harry agreed, and the three of them settled into the sofa together, the castle outside sparkling and quiet, while inside the anticipation thickened like hot chocolate. Chapter 338, The Dinner Party and the Disappearance of Crouch. The three of them had agreed to do nothing the entire morning and afternoon. Recovery, really. Even when the Weasley twins rang Ron up for a snowball fight, he turned them down. It wasn't just that the twins always ganged up on him. They liked to put little doses of dung bomb in the snowballs. He certainly didn't want to go to the dance smelling like patil. By the time Hermione finished reading Wand-Waving Wonders, Glamorizing Your Garments with Magic, she had at least managed to help Ron alter his dress robes and get rid of the ugly, dirty frills. Time slipped by, and it was already 5 o'clock. The common room filled with students dutifully primping for the evening feast. Harry and the others retreated to the dormitory to finish getting ready. In the Great Hall, Professor McGonagall fussed over the decorations. "Professor Wisen, a little to the left, a little higher. Perfect right there." She wore a red tartan robe and a hat trimmed with a peculiar thistle garland that Wisen privately found hideous. She watched him intently as he adjusted hundreds of little knots of mistletoe and ivy on the enchanted ceiling. After he satisfied her, Wisen wiped sweat from his forehead. Controlling so many small, scattered objects at once was harder than it looked. The house elves had done the main setup a day earlier. The starry ceiling, the silver frost, and the intricate Christmas trimmings were already perfect, but 2 hours before the feast, McGonagall suddenly decided the placement wasn't quite right and had pressed him into service. "Thank you, Professor Wisen," she said, pleased. "Now we wait for the feast to begin. Oh, the Weird Sisters should be at the door by now. Go and greet them." "All right." Wisen made his way toward the entrance. The Weird Sisters had been specially invited by Dumbledore and were, by reputation, the top act in the wizarding world. Wisen had heard their music, wild, energetic rock, and wondered whether they would suit a school ball. They turned out to be surprisingly down to earth, perhaps because Hogwarts had paid handsomely. The lead singer, Merton Graves, was a hairy man who reminded Wisen of a miniature Hagrid. Like the others, he favored deliberately torn black robes and an unruly artistic look. As evening fell, teachers and students filtered in. The champions and the visiting heads of school took a round table at the front, joined by Ludo Bagman and Percy Weasley. Weatherby was attending in place of old Barty. Wisen had not planned to sit at the head table, but Dumbledore had reached out and pulled him into the seat at his side, a grip firmer than Wisen expected from so kindly an old man, the sort of grip that could keep hold of an elder wand. No one objected, so Wisen had to accept. He'd secretly hoped to chat with the Weird Sisters and maybe get a signed record. When everyone had taken their places, Wisen found himself seated between Dumbledore and Victor Krum. Krum barely acknowledged him, keeping his eyes fixed on the young woman beside him, Hermione. Nearby, Fleur Delacour sat alone. Her partner had not joined her for the evening. Dumbledore tapped the small menu in front of him. "I'm glad we can all be together tonight," he said warmly. "But first, something to eat. Pork chops." At his word, a sizzling portion of pork chops appeared on his plate. The rest of the table followed his lead. Food arrived as people ordered. Wisen mimicked Dumbledore and asked for a steak, taking a bite that tasted of the house elves' ordinary but satisfying cooking. Dumbledore turned to Ludo Bagman. "Ludo, how is Barty? He hasn't written since he left." Bagman, with a Yorkshire pudding on his plate, set down his fork and offered a strained smile. "Ah, old Barty, same as ever. The ministry work wears him out. He needs a rest." Percy Weasley suddenly sat up very straight and spoke in a manner that sounded like a civil servant making a proclamation. "Professor Dumbledore, Mr. Crouch is currently at home celebrating Christmas with his family. He does need to rest. He's been under a lot of pressure from the World Cup. However, I can assure you the Department for International Magical Cooperation continues to run efficiently. You can relax, Percy, Dumbledore replied with a smile. Now is not the time for work. Percy reddened slightly and fell quiet. Vincent watched him and saw the younger man's eagerness for attention. No one else picked up the conversational thread. Has Mr. Crouch been away from the ministry for a long time? Vincent asked. Percy looked relieved to be asked and replied quickly, Yes, well, but we keep in touch by letter, Professor. Vincent did not believe it would be that simple. A department head absent for an extended period was unusual. Something about the situation set his nerves on edge. He glared at Dumbledore and started to speak, but Dumbledore raised a hand and hushed him. We'll talk about that later, Dumbledore said calmly. Vincent bit back his questions. This was not the time or place to press the matter further. Chapter 338, An Unusual Fleur. The feast continued, a buzz of conversation and clinking silver. Professor Vincent found his gaze drifting to Igor Karkaroff. The Durmstrang headmaster looked as he always did, dour, vigilant, like a hawk ready to strike. Victor Krum, despite his sullen air, was more talkative than he seemed. He was telling Hermione about life at Durmstrang in a thick accent, describing their castle and its statue and the 4 floors with an enthusiastic lilt. Harry watched Karkaroff and Victor, and the memory of the odd note from that morning tugged at him. As Victor talked, Karkaroff's displeasure grew more obvious. In a low voice that didn't suit the festive hall, he hissed, Victor, stop! Don't say any more. It's not proper to speak of those things in front of outsiders, and certainly not in front of your friend. Hermione frowned, and Victor's face went still. Dumbledore, calm as ever, let a smile play across his face. It's a pity to be so secretive, Igor. I took you for more welcoming. Karkaroff chuckled, showing yellowed teeth. Oh, I welcome you, Albus. He let his eyes sweep the table and for a moment settled on Professor Vincent. But Durmstrang does not welcome those with ulterior motives. I suspect Hogwarts does not either. Professor Vincent blinked. He was fairly certain he hadn't given Karkaroff any reason to suspect him, though he did admit he had looked Karkaroff over more than once. Sensing the slight awkwardness, Karkaroff quickly clarified, I mean those with ill intentions, not anyone currently present. Durmstrang welcomes your delegation. Dumbledore's smile tightened a fraction. If all goes well, the next Triwizard tournament may give us reason enough to visit. Madame Maxime's brow creased. By the arrangement, the next tournament will be held at Beauxbatons, she said primly. Ah, my memory fails me, Dumbledore replied lightly. As the 3 heads of school argued amiably about the tournament, Victor, sitting beside Professor Vincent, leaned over and spoke in halting English. Hello, Professor. Vincent raised an eyebrow, turning away from the principals. Oh, hello. Hermione said you are the best professor, Victor said, the name mispronounced but earnest. Vincent's mouth twitched despite himself. Compliments from students were always welcome. He slowed his words to help Victor catch the correct pronunciation. Hermione is an excellent student, he said. I'm sure you know that. Victor nodded and glanced toward Hermione and Harry. What do you teach? He asked. Care of magical creatures, Vincent answered. I don't know if Durmstrang has anything like it. I enjoy working with the creatures, getting to know their habits. Victor considered this. In our class, we learn how to protect from, how to deal with dangerous creatures, and then how to process them into useful materials, he said carefully. Vincent felt his skin prickle at the last phrase. It sounded less like protection than exploitation. Still, the conversation revealed a different side of Victor. Behind the grim public persona was a somewhat shy, ordinary young man. That softening of impression left Vincent a touch more sympathetic to the Bulgarian. Conversation at the table drifted and swung until it settled on Fleur Delacour, who had sat almost silently through much of the meal. Her presence without a dance partner drew murmurs. Few could believe a Beauty and Beauxbatons champion would be unescorted. Ludo Bagman was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. Miss Delacour, he said, grinning, what a surprise to see the Beauxbatons champion alone. Trouble finding someone to catch your eye? Fleur did not blush. No, I prefer to be alone, she replied simply. Professor Vincent, however, suspected another reason. According to the Tree of Wisdom's reports, Fleur's magic still showed irregularities, an unstable pattern that had not fully cleared. That, he thought, was likely why she avoided taking a partner. Madame Maxime rose to Fleur's defense gently. "Please do not trouble my pupil," she said. "Fleur has the right to refuse a partner. That does not affect her standing as a champion." "It's not my intention to trouble her," Ludo protested at once. "But at the ball, the champions are supposed to lead the dances. One person might not be, well, suitable. It would break with tradition." Fleur's expression tightened. Then, with a small sigh that surprised even Vincent, she said, "If it must be two, Mr. Bagman, would you be my partner?" The table fell quieter for a beat. Bagman blinked, then burst into laugh that was half flatter. "A very good joke, Miss Delacour, but at my age—" He gave a mock-offended look and then, with a conspiratorial wink, added, "Perhaps a younger candidate, Professor Vincent." Vincent's fork paused midair. "I am not young either, Mr. Bagman," he said dryly. "A champion should have a partner," Ludo insisted. "If the students are unsuitable, a professor is an option." Fleur's mouth twitched. "I had not thought of that," she said. Before she could decide, Vincent waved his hand. "No, that would be inappropriate." Ludo changed tack. "Then, Mr. Weasley," he suggested, unwilling to let the topic die. Percy Weasley, sitting straighter at the mention of his name, chuckled nervously as Madame Maxime's patience thinned again. "Do not pester my pupil," she warned, with a tone that made it clear she would not tolerate jokes about her student. Realizing he'd pushed too far and that the hall's mood could sour, Bagman let the matter drop. He had been trying only to liven the gathering. Stoking a quarrel would not do. Madame Maxime looked at him then with the sort of expression creditors wear when they discover a gambler cannot pay his debts. Bagman's grin faded, and the conversation moved on, leaving Fleur to her quiet composure, and Vincent with the unsettled thought of unstable magic hidden behind that calm face. Chapter 339, The Ball. As the feast drew to a close, Professor Vincent was the first to rise. He made his way to the corner where the weird sisters had been waiting. "Mr. Grapps," he said to their lead singer, "it's almost showtime." "Oh, of course, we're ready, and our instruments are fine." Mr. Grapps stepped forward, smiling. "Our Christmas schedule is always packed." "Because many places need an unparalleled band, Mr. Grapps," Vincent replied, wand in hand. "Ah, indeed," Grapps said with a proud nod. "That's why we took 3 gigs at once, at the same time." "At the same time?" Vincent repeated, puzzled. "Well, I suppose I've said too much." At a nudge from a bandmate, Grapps scratched his head awkwardly, as if realizing he'd revealed too much. Vincent didn't press him. It wasn't his business to pry. Besides, with things like time-turners, it wasn't impossible. "It's about time," Dumbledore's voice rang from the front. "Everyone, please stand. Clear the floor. Is everyone ready? Professor Vincent, if you will." Vincent understood and flicked his wand. In an instant, the nearest tables and chairs shrank and flew into a wooden box by the edge of the hall, leaving a broad space. At the same moment, a stage rose from the floor, strewn with instruments. "Let's go, guys," Grapps called, and the band took their places. The Weird Sisters opened with a soft, melancholic tune. It wasn't exactly Christmassy, but at least it wasn't outright bizarre. Nothing like a skeleton dance troupe. The ball began as the floating candles dimmed to light only the stage. The champions were the first onto the floor. Harry and Parvati moved together, awkward and uncertain, Harry's arm around her, though Parvati clearly led. Krum and Hermione were effortless and in perfect sync, the smoothest pair of the night. Fleur, without a chosen partner, swept her sister Gabrielle into the dance, and the two spun gracefully. Others followed, and the band's tempo slowly picked up. The drums and bass came into sharper focus. Vincent stayed at the edge of the floor, watching rather than joining. His gaze kept drifting to Karkaroff, the Durmstrang headmaster, who stood grimly staring in the direction of Krum. Or perhaps Hermione, his face cold and unreadable. If he were Krum, Vincent thought, he'd find that expression hard to ignore. Thankfully, Krum and Hermione were absorbed in the dance. "Aren't you going to dance?" a sudden voice asked. Vincent turned. Roskin was at his side. She'd appeared without his noticing. She wore a pretty dress, but the collar was a little rumpled, and a few leaves clung to the fabric. "Where were you?" he asked. He'd looked for her at the start of the feast, and hadn't seen her anywhere. "Oh, here and there," she said. "I fed the horses. They don't really eat unless I'm there, and it's dinner time for them." Vincent gave her a skeptical glance. Feeding the horses hardly seemed a good excuse to miss a Christmas ball. Roskin noticed his doubt and flushed a little. "All right, it was something else," she admitted, plucking a leaf off her collar and smoothing the fabric. "Come on, let's dance." She tugged him onto the floor, but they didn't stay long. When the music turned slow and wistful again, Roskin pulled him aside. "I don't like this kind of music. It's not good for dancing," she complained, and then, summoned by Madame Maxime, hurried off. Left alone, Vincent drifted to the side to watch. Moody was cutting an awkward figure on the floor, stumbling a few steps with Professor Sinistra. The wooden leg did not make for graceful dancing. Vincent saw Moody step on Sinistra's foot. She winced and then continued without complaint. When they finished, Moody limped over toward Vincent. "I suppose I shouldn't have danced," he said, tapping his leg and letting out a short laugh. "This thing isn't easy to control." "At least Professor Sinistra didn't mind," Vincent said. "Oh, she's a good person," Moody agreed, lowering his voice as he came closer. "Be careful of Karkaroff. He's trying to harm Harry." Vincent's face tightened. "Have you seen anything definite?" Moody's eyes flicked around the hall. "Haven't you noticed? You seem more careless than I thought." He bent his head nearer. "Karkaroff's been with Snape the last few days, and the dark mark's getting clearer. I saw it on his arm." The name of the dark mark made Vincent pause. Voldemort's strength was stirring again, a troubling but not unexpected sign. "I told Harry," Moody went on. "I'll keep an eye on them from now on, and you should too, Vincent." "You should be careful yourself," Vincent said pointedly. "Don't worry about me," Moody snorted, half amused. "No one's going to harm me." Vincent felt a small, private twinge of unease, a flash of the original story where Moody was replaced by Barty Crouch Jr. He pushed the thought down. Just then, Karkaroff moved. Without announcement, he turned and slipped out of the Great Hall. Both Vincent and Moody noticed. "Ah, looks like I have to go," Moody said, already starting off, dragging the wooden leg behind him. He shot Vincent a quick wink as he left. Vincent had no intention of trailing Karkaroff. That was precisely the sort of thing Moody was good at, and perhaps Karkaroff wasn't headed for anything nefarious. Harry was still in the hall. For the moment, that was some comfort.